first time I saw it, I thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the light in my bedroom at 3 a.m. But shadows don't have eyes that follow you. Shadows don't breathe. I've always been a light sleeper. The slightest noise would jolt me awake. That night, 3 weeks ago, was no different. A soft scratching sound from the corner of my ceiling had my eyes wide open in seconds. I reached for my phone to use as a flashlight, but what I saw made my blood freeze. There, where the wall met the ceiling, was a dark mass about the size of a large dog. But it wasn't solid. It seemed to shift and ripple like smoke. Except smoke doesn't cling to surfaces the way this thing did, and smoke definitely doesn't have two pale yellowish eyes. I blinked hard, convinced I was still dreaming. When I opened my eyes, it was gone. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks in that hazy space between sleep and wakefulness. But deep down, I knew better. The next night, I stayed up late watching videos on my laptop, trying to keep my mind off what I'd seen. Eventually, exhaustion won out around 2 a.m., and I drifted off to sleep. This time, it wasn't a sound that woke me, but a feeling. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. My eyes snapped open. The digital clock on my nightstand read 3:17 a.m. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. Something was different about my room. The air felt heavier, colder. Then I saw it again, not in the corner this time, but spread across the ceiling directly above my bed. It was bigger now, covering nearly half the ceiling. Those eyes, those horrible unblinking eyes, stared down at me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't respond. I was paralyzed, trapped beneath this thing that had no name, no classification in any book I'd ever read. As I watched, frozen in terror, a section of the dark mass began to stretch downward, reaching toward me like a tendril of thick, black syrup. It stopped about a foot above my face, hovering there, pulsating slightly. Then, I heard it.
Hello, friend.
The voice didn't come from the thing. It seemed to form directly inside my head, bypassing my ears entirely. It was deep but somehow childlike at the same time, innocent yet ancient. With tremendous effort, I managed to roll away, falling hard onto the floor. When I looked up, the ceiling was empty. Normal. I spent the rest of the night with every light in my apartment turned on, researching shadow creatures, demons, hallucinations, anything that might explain what I was experiencing. I found nothing that matched exactly what I'd seen. The closest were accounts of shadow people or night hags, but those descriptions fell short. This was something else. Something that didn't have a name. The next day I called my best friend. I needed to tell someone, anyone, before I convinced myself I was going crazy.
Hey, I need to talk to you about something weird that's been happening.
Weird how? Like forgot where you parked weird or seeing ghosts weird?
Definitely closer to the ghost end of the spectrum. But not a ghost, I don't know what it is.
All right, I'm listening.
I told him everything. About the shadow on my ceiling, the eyes, the voice in my head. To his credit, he didn't laugh or immediately suggest I see a psychiatrist.
Have you been sleeping okay lately? Or maybe trying any new medications?
I'm not hallucinating, this is real. It's in my apartment and it's, I don't know, watching me.
Look, why don't you stay at my place tonight? Get out of that apartment, clear your head.
I accepted his offer immediately. That night, I slept on his couch without incident. No shadows, no voices. Nothing but peaceful sleep for the first time in days. I began to wonder if maybe he was right. Maybe stress or lack of sleep had caused me to see things. The next morning, I felt refreshed, almost embarrassed about my panic. I thanked him and headed back to my apartment, convinced the whole thing had been in my head. I was wrong. As soon as I unlocked my door, I knew something was different. The air inside was cold, much colder than it should have been even with the AC running. And there was a smell, faint but unmistakable, like wet soil and something metallic. I almost turned around and left, but this was my home. I couldn't let some unexplained phenomenon drive me away. So I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Everything looked normal at first glance. I checked each room carefully, looking in corners, behind furniture, even inside closets. Nothing seemed out of place. I began to relax, thinking maybe the cold and the smell were just my imagination working overtime. Then I noticed my bedroom door was closed. I always leave it open. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. I took a deep breath and pushed the do or open. My bedroom was dark, despite it being midday. The blinds were drawn, which I hadn't done before leaving. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, I saw it. Not on the ceiling this time, but covering the entire far wall like a living mural of darkness. It was massive now, at least 8 feet tall and just as wide. Those yellow eyes seemed to brighten when they fixed on me, and the mass rippled with what I could only interpret as excitement.
You came back. I missed you, friend.
Again, that voice directly in my head. I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to retreat, unable to advance.
What? What are you?
The mass shifted, parts of it swirling faster, while others slowed, creating patterns that almost resembled a face.
I don't know what I'm called. Do you know what you're called?
The question confused me, but I answered automatically.
I'm a human. A person, human person. These are labels. I have no label. I simply am.
A tendril of darkness extended from the mass, reaching toward me slowly. I flinched, but held my ground.
Don't be afraid. I've been watching you for so long, waiting for you to see me.
My mind raced. How long had this thing been in my apartment? Had it always been here, just beyond my perception?
What do you want from me, company? Understanding the same things you want.
The tendril retreated back into the mass. The eyes blinked for the first time.
You left yesterday. It was lonely.
Despite my fear, I felt a strange pang of guilt? The emotion made no sense, but there it was.
I'm sorry, I didn't know you were sentient. Many things are sentient that humans don't recognize. The spaces between walls, the darkness under beds, the silence after midnight.
I took a cautious step into the room. The mass rippled again, this time in what seemed like pleasure.
Yes, come closer. Let me show you what I am.
Something in that voice, in those eyes, pulled at me. I took another step, then another. When I was about 3 feet from the wall, the mass began to change. It thinned out, spreading wider across the wall, and in its center, a darker spot appeared. Like a hole or a doorway.
Look inside. See my home.
I leaned forward slightly, peering into the darkness. At first I saw nothing. Then shapes began to form. Impossible geometries, spaces that folded in on themselves, colors that had no names in any human language. And movement. Things moving in that impossible space. Things that made my mind recoil, even as my eyes struggled to comprehend them.
Beautiful, isn't it? This is where I come from, where we all come from.
I jerked back, suddenly aware of how close I'd come to the mass.
There are more of you? Many more, but most cannot cross over as I can. They need help.
The implications hit me like a physical blow. This thing was a scout, an advance party for something larger.
I don't understand. Crossover from where? From the spaces between. We've always been here, alongside your reality, but separate, watching, waiting for the right conditions.
I took a step back, then another. The mass seemed to pulse with disappointment.
You're afraid again. Don't be. We mean no harm. We only want to share your world. It's so solid here, so real.
I reached the doorway and gripped the frame for support. My legs felt weak, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat.
I need to think about this. It's a lot to take in. Of course, think, but don't leave. Again, I get so lonely when you're gone.
I backed out of the room and closed the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the knob. I needed help, but who would believe me? Who could possibly help with something like this? I spent the rest of the day in my living room, as far from the bedroom as possible. I researched interdimensional beings, shadow creatures, anything that might explain what was happening. Most of what I found was fiction or conspiracy theories, nothing substantial. As night fell, I knew I couldn't stay in the apartment, but I also couldn't leave. What if this thing followed me? What if it found someone else, someone who might not be as cautious as I was? Around midnight, I heard my bedroom door creak open. I hadn't locked it. I didn't think a lock would stop whatever this was anyway. I sat rigid on the couch, watching the hallway. A tendril of darkness crept along the floor, moving like smoke but with purpose. It paused at the edge of the living room, then retreated slightly.
Why do you sit in the light? Come to the darkness, it's more comfortable there.
I had turned on every lamp in the living room. The brightness seemed to be keeping the mass at bay.
I prefer the light. Light hurts, it burns away the spaces between, makes it hard to maintain form.
That was useful information. I filed it away, a potential defense if things went badly.
What exactly do you want from me? I told you, company. And a favor.
The tendril moved forward again, this time extending toward the lamp nearest to me.
Just a small favor. Help me bring others across. The opening is too small for them. It needs to be widened.
The tendril touched the lamp, and the bulb flickered. Once, twice, then went out completely. The room dimmed noticeably.
How would I even do that? It's simple. You just need to say yes. Invite us in. The more who acknowledge us, the wider the opening becomes.
Another lamp flickered and died. The darkness from the hallway was growing, spreading into the living room like spilled ink.
And if I say no?
The mass paused. The yellow eyes appeared in the darkness of the hallway, blinking slowly.
Then I will be very disappointed and very lonely for a little while.
The threat was implicit. It would find someone else, someone who might say yes.
What happens if I say yes? What happens to our world? Change? Beautiful change. The spaces between would merge with your reality. No more separation, no more loneliness for any of us.
The remaining lamps began to flicker. The darkness was almost to the couch now, those yellow eyes growing larger, more intense.
I need more time to think. There is no more time. The alignment is perfect now. Say yes. Say it now.
The mass surged forward suddenly, engulfing the coffee table, reaching for my feet. I jumped up onto the couch, heart racing.
No, I don't consent to this.
The mass recoiled as if struck. The eyes narrowed, and for the first time I felt anger emanating from it.
You disappoint me, friend, after I shared my secrets with you.
The darkness retreated slightly, but not back to the hallway. It circled the couch, surrounding me.
I won't help you. Whatever you're planning, it stops here. It doesn't stop. It can't stop. The process has already begun, with or without you.
As if to emphasize its point, the final lamp died, plunging the room into near total darkness. Only the faint glow from streetlights outside provided any illumination. The mass expanded, rising up the walls, covering the ceiling. Those yellow eyes multiplied. 2 became 4, then 8, then too many to count. All staring down at me.
We see you, we've always seen you, all of you, scurrying about in your solid world, never noticing the spaces between.
I fumbled for my phone, turning on its flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, and where it touched the mass, it sizzled and retreated, leaving wisps of what looked like smoke. I swept the light around, creating a small circle of safety. The mass hissed, not with a physical sound, but directly into my mind.
That hurts. Stop.
I stood my ground, keeping the light moving, pushing back the darkness, inch by inch.
You can't keep this up forever. Batteries die, bulbs burn out, and we'll still be here, in the spaces between, waiting.
I made a break for the front door, keeping my phone light sweeping in front of me. The mass tried to intercept me, tendrils shooting across my path, but they recoiled from the light. I reached the door and yanked it open, spilling out into the well-lit hallway of my apartment building. The mass stopped at the threshold. Those countless eyes watching me with what I could only describe as hunger.
Running again? It won't help. We're everywhere now. The invitation has been made, just not by you.
I backed away, keeping my eyes on the doorway.
What do you mean, who invited you? Someone always says yes. Someone always wants to see what's in the spaces between.
As if on cue, I heard a door open further down the hallway. My neighbor stepped out, a middle-aged woman I'd exchanged pleasantries with, but never really knew.
Is everything okay out here? I heard a commotion.
Before I could warn her, before I could say anything at all, I saw her eyes. Yellow, unblinking, not human.
Oh, there you are. We've been looking for you.
Her smile was too wide, her movements too fluid as she approached. Behind her, darkness spilled from her apartment, crawling along the walls and ceiling. I ran, down the stairs, out of the building, into the street. I didn't stop until I reached a 24-hour diner several blocks away, brightly lit and full of people. That was 3 days ago. I haven't been back to my apartment. I've been staying in hotels, always with the lights on, but I see them now. The spaces between things. The darkness that isn't just absence of light, but something alive and aware. They're spreading. Yesterday, I saw a businessman on the subway with yellow eyes. This morning, it was a barista at the coffee shop. They look human, act human. But there's something off about their movements, their expressions. I don't know what this is called. I don't know if there's a name for the invasion that's happening right before our eyes, in the spaces we don't normally see. All I know is that it's too late to stop it. The spaces between are opening, they're coming through, and they're hungry for our reality. If you're listening to this, look carefully at the shadows in your room. Are they moving when they shouldn't be? Do you feel eyes watching you from the dark corners? Do you notice people acting strangely, their movements too fluid, their smiles too wide? If so, keep your lights on, all of them, for as long as you can. And whatever you do, don't say yes. Don't invite them in, though I fear it's already too late. The spaces between have already found their way in, and they're never going back.